Hey, 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 welcome back to today's Black Grandmothers podcast. And so today's episode is a little bit touchy for me um, because it's something that I have dealt with for a long time. So the question I want to ask is saying no to your family or your grandkids, is that considered setting a boundary or is it self-respect? Um, or is it considered betrayal? And everybody has an opinion on this. Your children has an opinion on this. You have your own opinion on it, but how do you move forward with it? And so setting boundaries is healthy. It's how you um, set your life, to move forward. And if you don't have, boundaries, then you find yourself in stressful situations. You find yourself saying yes to things that you're not comfortable with, or you find yourself in a moment of regret because you have signed on to something. And then when you think about it and it comes back, comes back around, it's like, why did I say yes to that? And I'm guilty of that. And so um, I'm going to go over three things, just three areas, because it's a very wide and broad discussion that we can have. And at the end of this um, podcast, I want you to go into the comment section and I want you to weigh in on where you fall in boundaries or betrayal in certain situations. So the first one is babysitting boundaries. So a lot of you get both sides of this. You get grandmothers who say, I don't babysit, those are my grandbabies, so I love taking care of them, I love being with them. But then you have the other side where there's grandmothers who say, um, I'm not babysitting, those are your kids, you take care of your kids, I raise mine. So it's two sides of it. And respectfully, there can be, two sides to that. There can be, but how do you handle when you say no? And for instance, for me, I don't consider I'm babysitting my grandkids. I consider me providing help and support, to my daughters. And I also find it to be a joyful time when I am with my grandkids. But there are times when it can become overwhelming and I want to say no. And sometimes I feel like if I say no, and I've always said yes, you know, what, what effect is that going to have on my relationship, you know, um, with my daughters? My grandkids totally, they'll understand. I could tell them no all the time. Um, so it becomes a thing where, it could create conflict in your family. And like I said, some grandmothers don't care. Some people, they don't care if it causes a conflict. They set their boundaries. That's it. I said no, and that's it. I can keep them on the weekend, but you need to let me know ahead of time because I have things to do. And it's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes I think it's the delivery of the message, and the expectation that has been set, um, all along. And so, um, how have you handled that moving, and how will you handle that moving forward? Um, do you think that that is depriving the child of the time that they can have with you? Do you think that that is where the child can look at, like they're missing opportunities, of learning from you, getting their stories and things like that? Or do you just feel like, look, I'm tired. I've done this, been there, done that with my kids. I'm tired. Because I'm gonna tell you, kids can be a handful when you are taking care of them and when they're in your care. And then you have you have these things where there's certain restrictions. I don't feed my kids this. They can't eat that. They can eat this, but they can't, they can do this, but they can't do that. And so sometimes when they're in your care, you want to make the decisions on. Now, when it comes to food, I don't cross the line with that. If my daughters tell me, I like my grandkids, none of my daughters eat pork, and that's based on a religious, it's a religious basis, and it's they consider it's just not healthy. And so I totally respect that. And what I do now, every now and then, I do like me some pork ribs. Now, I haven't claimed no pork, but what I do is I respect my family's decision, and I do limit my intake. So I may have some barbecue ribs once a year around the holidays, and that's it. But for the most part, we eat turkey, chicken, veggies, things like that. So that I totally respect that boundary. And but for instance, when you do have those type of boundaries, what do? Like with candy. I've had so many issues with my teeth. I used to, just give my grandkids candy and, all the time. And, I've slowed that down as well because, I don't want them to have bad teeth issues. I don't want them to be like me. So I don't want them to have, those type of issues growing up. So I do limit that. So, um, and the other thing is that I always, I'll ask for permission. But see, sometimes they get in the store and they try and tell me, well, mama's okay with this. Nope. Let me call her and find out. So, you know, I have adjusted, because when I first became a grandmother, I have 9 grandkids, and my first few grandkids, it's like you want to give them everything. You want them to have everything. You want them to give them what they want. And sometimes I still do struggle with that, but I've gotten much better. So, you know, um, when you talk about the babysitting boundaries, where are you at with that? Is it, boundary, or do you feel the guilt of, betrayal? So I want you to make, comment um, below. The second is very big, the financial boundaries. And I also, struggle with this because I have a 16-year-old grandson. I have an 18-year-old granddaughter. The others are, a little bit younger. And what I struggle with is so my grandson, you know, always needing something, always, wanting something, he's a young man. He plays football, he want to wear he want to wear the latest clothes and the latest gym shoes and all of that. And so at first, he texted me, Grandma, I need $25. Grandma, I need this. And so I would just send it. I would just send it like, okay, what are you going to do with it? Okay, I'm going to send you the money. I'll cash app you and things like that. And I know I am not the only grandmother that has done that. And but when I started looking at my cash app and I started totaling up what I had been sending him, I hadn't been counting it up, because you look at $25 here, $10 here, Grandma, I'm hungry. And I looked back and I looked at how much I had sent him over a certain period of time, and it was ridiculous. So what I began doing, I have a house, and one of my daughters live in my house, and the house needs maintenance, upkeep, grass cut, pick up the paper, cut some trees down, just keep up the maintenance of the house. And so what I did, I told my grandson, I said, look, here's what we can do. I will put you on my payroll, property maintenance or property assistant. I gave him a title. You can be my property assistant. And so we'll go over to the house and, you could do little projects over there. to make the money that I give you, instead of me just, you work for it. Just, every time I give you $25, you take it and you just buy $25 worth of food or whatever. So I'm trying to teach him responsibility, and, I'm trying to teach him that money just doesn't come like that. You just can't text people and say, hey, I need $25. I need this. I need that. It adds up because, see, you think about it, there's me, there's his mom, there's his aunties on his dad's side. So you think about, I don't like the idea of him having to reach out to everybody and ask for money. So I created a job for him. And so he goes over there, I'll take him over there and he'll help out, and I'll pay him. But before I pay him, I do get an idea of what it is. What are you thinking about doing with this? I want you to save a portion of it. Now, if he does that, he may not do that, but at least I'm, instilling that in him, that, you just can't, people just don't have money like that to just give. So that's a boundary that I've set. Now, here's the other thing. One of my daughters asked me, well, how did you get from giving him money to now giving him money to work for it? He's still doing the same thing. And it's like, it's the value that's placed on it, and at least we're working towards him understanding the value of a dollar, working for it, that, he can work for his money, whether, so he contacted me 2 days ago and he said, Grandma, can you help me put together a resume? I want to start looking for a part-time job after school. So I did. I helped him put together a resume and I gave him a job description of property manager assistant. And on his resume, it just details like, do yard work, um, you know, uh, take out, clean up trash around the house, just different little jobs. And so that's valuable. That's valuable experience that he's getting. So it's like I would rather do that than to just be giving him money and then he doesn't understand the fact that you just can't call people up and say, hey, I need $25. Can you give me 20? I want to buy a shirt. I want to buy, it if he does spend the money, at least he's worked for it. So that's one of the things. So um but you also have to look at your side of it, the financial side of it. It's like, can you really afford to do that? Can you really afford, and especially, I mean, if you're working a 9 to 5, you're balancing a business, you're bringing in money, you can absolutely put your grandchild, if, with the parents' permission, on your payroll and pay them, and then it becomes a write-off. So make it an advantage to you if you do it. But I think a lot of times there's also those grandmothers that give their last and then they don't have what they need for their needs. They don't have the money for their needs. And it's like, that's where you got to set a boundary. You have to limit what you can do. You have to limit what you can just dish out and give away. Don't put yourself in a situation where now you're hurting and you're struggling. Because I'm going to tell you, people will find a way to do what it is that they want to do. They're going to find the money. They're going to find the time. They're going to find the outfit. They're going to figure it out while you sitting back struggling, trying to help someone else. And when it comes to, your own kids, you got to set those same boundaries as well, because I have found myself, because I wanted, I'm the matriarch, and because I wanted my family to always do things together, I would plan trips, and they wouldn't be like, they'd be like a trip to Vegas or a trip to Georgia or whatever, just small family trips. And I wanted everyone to go. It's like, I want everyone to be together. So don't worry about, I'll take care of everything. You just show up and pay for your own food and things like that. And I found myself spending thousands of dollars doing that. But what I also found was it was about me. It was about what I wanted. It wasn't about what they wanted. So what I started seeing happening was a level of frustration with everybody because everybody was there because I wanted them there. They weren't really there because they wanted to go on this particular trip. So I had to realize I had to back down from that. I had to change how I approach that. And I had to change how I presented it, and it was like, okay, if, like here's for instance in October, so I went to Alabama A&M. And in October, we're going to Alabama A&M's homecoming. And the reason I'm doing this is because it's part of my legacy. It's part of my history. The last time we went, I only had my daughters. I didn't have any grandchildren. And so I want them to see where I hung out. I want them to see the dorm I lived in. I want them to see through my eyes, the experience that I had on a Black college campus. And so we're going to the homecoming in October. And for me, we're doing it as frugal as possible, because we're only going to stay one night. We're not going to, make a big deal about it. We'll get something to eat. We'll enjoy the activities, go to the game, the parade, and things like that. For me, that's part of our legacy. And that's something that I want them to share and want them to know about me. So it's important for me. So, but there's still boundaries that have to be set in terms of what we're spending, who's doing what, who's going, and things like that. And I understand my girls also have boundaries. If it's not in their budget, I understand you can't go. If it's something that you don't want to do, I understand. I've grown a lot in that. But the other part of that is when you are protecting your finances, you know, you may be getting, comments like, well, you've always done this. Why aren't you, what changed? And you might not even get the comments, but you just might get the side eye about, well, what's changed with mom or what's changed with grandma? She used to do this and now she's not doing it anymore. Well, have that conversation. Have that conversation with them and let them know why you're doing it. And sometimes the boundaries and the betrayals is not always set on the money, the tangible thing. You know, um, Sometimes it's deeply rooted in family issues, family, how the expectations that were set forth from the beginning. um, Sometimes there's trauma in the family that could be deeply rooted. Sometimes it's tradition, that families are you know, brought up where the oldest person in the family handled everything. And sometimes and the thing is that when you set those type of traditions and things like that, it's hard to break them. It's hard to come back and say, okay, I ain't doing this no more. But if you gotta say that, give them an explanation. Just talk about it. Tell them why. Communicate. Maybe it's, look, my financial situation changed. I just can't do this anymore. I need help. Just be honest about it. The third one I want to talk about is emotional boundaries. And emotional boundaries is more of, you know, constant phone calls with drama, um, constant drama in the family, constant drama that causes lifelong trauma. And um, you may get to, have you ever been in a situation where every time someone has a problem, they're calling you and you're on the phone You're listening because you've always been that ear. You've always been that ear. You've always been the one to listen to everybody's problems. And you are overwhelmed with it. You are just done. You're like, I'm just done. I can't take anymore. I can't hear anymore. Nothing's changing. You're doing the same thing over and over again. You're bringing me the same issues, you know, and you get to a point where um, you you need a break. You need a break. Um, and then you need a break, but then you're also may be considered as you don't care because you're not listening to me. You're not listening to my problems, so you just don't care anymore. And that's in another person's mind. But you may just be on overwhelm. You may be dealing with something inside of you. You may be dealing with your own situations. And now you're ready to set that boundary when you've always been there. You've always accepted those phone calls. You've even tuned into those phone calls and you've even given your opinion and maybe sometimes your advice. And then all of a sudden something's happening with you and then you just cut that person off and it's like I can't do it anymore, and that could be considered as not caring. Communicate it like, look, I got my own ish going on and I got to handle my stuff. I can't take this. I can't deal with this anymore. I got to build myself up. And respectfully, people have to respect that, especially when it comes to your kids. When it comes to your grandkids, I know you're going to be Johnny on the spot. You're going to be in your car. That's me. You're going to be in your car. You're going to be like, what? What's going on? I'm there. You're going to be that way. But understand what you're doing. You're building that thing that at some point in your life, you might get tired of it and you might want to set that boundary, and then it may be taken as grandma don't care no more. She don't care about me. I'm telling you, this will happen. She don't care about me. She don't care what happens to me because any other time I can call her and she's there and she's giving me advice and she's Johnny on the spot or whatever. But you get tired of up jumping in your car, driving across town or wherever you have to go to deal with someone else's issues. So at some point, think about what you're setting up long term when you do it this way, and just start digging in a little bit more and setting some more setting a few more boundaries in terms of that. And I'm not saying don't respond. I'm not saying don't be there for your grandkids. I'm not saying that because nobody can tell me not to be there for my grandkids or my daughters. But I'm preserving my health at this point in life. I'm preserving my health because I don't want to be taken out of here because of someone else's stress, someone else's inability to handle their situations, and someone else's inability to care about me and what's happening with me. Think about how many times do people pick up the phone and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Do you need anything? What do you want to do today?" I told my kids, like, when my birthday come around, holidays come around that, I celebrate. I told them, I said, don't go buy me a bunch of stuff. Don't go buy me a bunch of stuff, and I've never communicated this to them before. So typically they'll buy what it is they want. But as you grow wiser and you get older, think certain things are no longer important to you. Don't buy me no clothes. Don't buy me, no shoes and things like that. You know what I want? Buy me some gift cards so I can go get my oil changed. buy me some cards so I can get what I need off of Amazon, so I can buy what I need. Now if they want to do a special gift, they want to take me on a trip or cruise or something like that, that's cool. But here's the thing now, when you grow older and wiser, and you don't even have to be older, but when you grow wiser, there are certain things that are not important to you anymore. And I'm more I prefer experiences in my lifetime right now. Give me an experience, because I can have a whole bunch of stuff. And I do love the little trinkets my grandkids will give me, like for Mother's Day, and that those things are really special to me. So I just wanted to, so I wanna challenge you with boundaries and betrayals. And so I have a list of things that I want you to consider. And I want you to write your comments in terms of where do you stand on certain sides of things. And then from there, begin to work on if you feel like you need to set a boundary. And if you think it's going to look like betrayal to certain people, which you don't have to put a whole lot into that, because if it's about you, it's about you and it's about what you feel. But I want to read you a few things. The reason why boundaries are betrayals, and are considered betrayals, I should say. Um, boundaries boundaries as betrayals. Um, it's because this side believes that grandparents should always sacrifice for family, no matter what. Tradition and culture. Many cultures see grandparents as the backbone of the family, and saying no is seen as rejecting their role. And that's some family traditions. Um, Family first mentality, the belief that family always come before personal needs. Grandparents are expected to show up, no excuses. Love equals sacrifice. Some believe the ultimate proof of love is giving, even when it costs you personally. Refusing feels like selfishness. Guilt as a tool. Adult children may use guilt. Your grandma, you're supposed to, as a way to keep this cycle alive. Emotional fallout. On this side, boundaries feel like rejection, abandonment, or even betrayal because they don't match the expectation of endless giving. And the core message to this is, if you love your family, you'll never say no. That's deep, because a lot of people think that way. And sometimes we got to put people in check, and we've got to bring them back to understanding that. So then there's boundaries. Boundaries are love. Okay. And this side sees boundaries not as betrayal, but as a form of healthy love for yourself and for your family. So self preservation. Grandmothers have health, finances, and peace of mind to protect. Saying yes to everything leads to burnout. Teaching by example. By setting boundaries, grandparents model for children and grandchildren how to self respect and balance in their own lives. Healthy relationships. Relationships built on guilt and obligation eventually create resentment. Boundaries keep love pure. Sustainability. A grandparent who cares for themselves can show up longer and stronger for their family. Without boundaries, they may collapse under the weight of expectations. That's what I'm talking about, that stress of trying to keep up with something that you're keeping up with for someone else's benefit and not for yours. Redefining legacy. True legacy isn't just sacrifice. It's passing down wisdom, balance, and self-worth. So the core message to this is boundaries are not betrayal. they are the blueprint for healthy love. So um, I want you to begin to think about this, begin to think about your health in this situation. And um, you don't have to make any hard stops. You don't have to make any drastic changes, but start thinking about what legacy you want to build and what you want it to look like and how you want people to respond to you, how you want people to respect your boundaries, because a lot of times people, and sometimes even with our kids, you hear them say, I want you to respect my boundaries with my children. Well, grandma got boundaries too. And I want you to keep that same energy when that energy is brought to you. What are your boundaries? You know, what are your traditions that you want to keep up, you want to instill in your family, but you don't want to be burnt out about it. And you want it to be a great time. I personally am working on that, and it's nothing that happens overnight. It's nothing, you're going to always have challenges in this area. So it's nothing that you are going to just change overnight, but start thinking about it for your own health and your own goodness, and your own growth. Start thinking about what boundaries do I need to set. So, um, if this episode helped you in any way, please subscribe, share it, comment on it, and let's have more discussions like this. Thank you once again for showing up for um, today's Black Grandmothers podcast. There's more to come. And also look out for my 5-day challenge that's happening next week. So I'll be putting that link in the comments as well. And talk to you soon. See you next week.